Strong men don't manage anxiety, they eliminate the cause. Modern man wakes up tired even before the day begins, not because he slept little, but because his mind never truly shuts off. He opens his eyes already reacting to work, reacting to expectations, reacting to constant comparison, reacting to his own thoughts. He calls this anxiety. Society confirms it's normal. The medical industry labels it. Culture dictates managing, breathing, accepting, coexisting. All of this stems from a flawed premise. Anxiety is not the enemy. Anxiety is the alarm, and the alarm is ringing because no one is in control. The first mistake of modern man is believing he feels too much. He doesn't. He thinks too much without direction. The mind was made to execute orders, not to govern. When there is no command, it takes control chaotically. It thinks about everything at once. Constant anticipation, useless simulations, unreal scenarios, fear without a concrete object. This is not sensitivity, it is an absence of internal hierarchy. Men were not designed to process emotions as their primary occupation. Emotions are signals, not governing systems. When a man bases his identity on trying to control how he feels, he abandons the central function, deciding, acting, maintaining direction under pressure. Anxiety arises precisely in this vacuum. Where there should be command, there is internal debate. Where there should be decision, there is rumination. Observe the pattern. Anxious men live in constant negotiation with themselves. Maybe tomorrow. What if it goes wrong? Is it worth it? This endless internal dialogue is not psychological depth, it's mental indiscipline. A mind without order creates noise. Noise creates tension. Tension turns into anxiety. And then the man tries to treat the symptom, not the structural flaw. The modern flaw is clear. Man has been taught to interpret discomfort as an emotional problem, when in reality it is a problem of internal authority. Anxiety arises when there is no final decision, when everything is provisional, when nothing is definitive, when man does not trust his own word. A mind that does not trust its own decisions enters a permanent state of alert. That is anxiety. There is no such thing as an anxious man who is also decisive. Real decision-making breaks mental loops. Command eliminates overthinking. A man who decides and executes has no psychological space for chronic anxiety. He may feel momentary fear, pressure, tension, but not diffuse and constant anxiety. Anxiety is the residue of prolonged indecision. Modern culture has reversed this. It says, understand your anxiety. No, anxiety doesn't want to be understood. It wants to be ended. And it is only ended when the cause is eliminated. The cause is not hidden trauma in most men. The cause is a life without structure, without hierarchy, without non-negotiable personal codes. The man who lives reacting lives anxious. The man who commands lives tense only when necessary and relaxed the rest of the time. Practical application doesn't begin with breathing techniques. It begins with decision. Decision about schedules. Decision about minimum standards. Decision about what will not be tolerated. A man who wakes up without a clear order for his day has already entered a psychological disadvantage. The mind wakes up seeking stimulation, threat, validation. It finds all of this in excess. Result, anxiety. The reinforcement of identity here is simple and non-negotiable. Men don't manage emotional states. Men build structures that make certain states unnecessary. The mind respects those who give clear orders. If you don't govern, it governs you. And a mind without governance is chaotic by nature. The final silence of this topic is this. If your anxiety disappeared tomorrow, but your life continued without control, it would return. It always does. Because the problem was never the feeling. It was the absence of inner authority. There's a reason why male anxiety never diminishes, despite never being discussed so much. The reason is simple and uncomfortable. The system doesn't want men eliminating the cause. It wants men eternally managing symptoms. A man who eliminates the cause doesn't consume endless protocols. He doesn't need constant validation. He doesn't remain dependent. This is unacceptable for a culture based on prolonged fragility. Modern man has been trained to observe himself excessively. With every sensation, he stops, he analyzes, he interprets, he questions. This constant self-monitoring creates hyperconsciousness. Hyperconsciousness generates anxiety. The mind enters a state of continuous vigilance. Everything becomes a signal. Everything becomes a risk. Nothing becomes action. Man becomes trapped in his own skull. The structural flaw here is clear. Anxiety has become an identity. I am anxious. From that moment on, the person organizes themselves around the problem, not the solution. They adjust their life to accommodate the anxiety. They avoid pressure. They avoid confrontation. They avoid responsibility. And the more they avoid it, the more fragile they become. The more fragile they are, the more anxious they become. It's a closed cycle, perfectly functional for those who profit from it. Eliminating the cause requires confrontation. It requires man to abandon psychological comfort. It requires him to accept voluntary tension. Modern anxiety is born from excessive comfort combined with excessive stimulation. Never in history has there been so little real danger and so much mental activation. The body was made to react to concrete threats. Today, it reacts to emails, notifications, abstract social expectations. The nervous system does not distinguish, it simply responds. The implicit command principle is this: chosen tension eliminates involuntary anxiety. Men who choose tough challenges don't suffer from diffuse anxiety. They suffer from real fatigue, real pain, real responsibility. And that organizes the mind. The mind needs clear priorities. It needs to know what matters now. Modern life doesn't provide that. Man needs to impose his will. Practical application doesn't involve endless introspection. It involves restriction. Restriction of stimuli, restriction of options, restriction of internal dialogue. A man who reduces choices reduces anxiety. A man who imposes routine imposes predictability. The mind relaxes when it knows what comes next. Chaos generates anxiety. Order generates inner silence. The industry will never say this clearly because order requires male authority. And authority today is seen as a threat, not a virtue. They prefer men who are conscious, sensitive, in process. Men who are perpetually in process never reach leadership positions. And a man without leadership is predictable, controllable, and weak. Identity reinforcement. Strong men don't negotiate with their own minds. They establish rules and expect obedience. This isn't brutality, it's internal leadership. A leader who asks permission from the troops loses respect. A mind that doesn't respect its owner creates anxiety as a way to take control. Closure is silent and uncomfortable. As long as you're trying to live with anxiety, it will be your companion. The day you decide to eliminate the cause, excessive comfort, endless stimulation, lack of structure, anxiety will have no function. And everything that has no function disappears. Modern man believes he overthinks because he is intelligent. This is the most dangerous lie he tells himself. Overthinking is not a sign of mental depth. It's a sign of escape. Escape from the final decision. Escape from the responsibility that comes after it's done. Thinking without acting is not strategy. It's psychological procrastination. Anxiety sets in when thought loses its practical function. The mind was created to solve real and immediate problems. When there is no action, thought becomes circular. It begins to revolve around infinite possibilities, improbable risks, and scenarios that will never happen. This creates continuous tension. The body enters a state of alert without physical release or concrete resolution. Result: chronic anxiety. The diagnosis here is simple. Anxious men are trying to think in order to avoid acting. Action defines. Action closes doors. Action creates consequences. Thinking indefinitely keeps all options open, and this gives a false sense of control. But too many open options create paralysis. Paralysis creates anxiety. The modern flaw is the romanticization of thought. Man has been convinced that reflecting is always superior to acting. That questioning is nobler than deciding. That waiting for the right moment is maturity. None of this is true under pressure. In real-world environments, those who survive are those who decide with incomplete information and stand by the outcome. The implicit command principle here is brutal. Decision eliminates anxiety because it ends the internal war. When you decide, the mind changes mode. It exits simulation mode and enters execution mode. The noise decreases, focus increases, energy aligns. Even if the decision is imperfect, it is psychologically superior to perfect indecision. Men who live with anxiety typically have a clear pattern. They avoid irreversible decisions. Career changes, ending a relationship, committing to a path, cutting out habits. They prefer to remain in intermediate states. Thinking about it, analyzing, evaluating options. This mental limbo takes a daily toll. The price is anxiety. Practical application demands brutality towards oneself. A man needs to reduce the space between thinking and acting. He thought, he decided, he executed. No prolonged debate, no justifying to oneself. The mind learns quickly when it realizes there is no negotiation. It stops creating noise when it understands that the decision will be made anyway. This also requires accepting error. Anxious men are often terrified of making mistakes because they associate error with a loss of personal value. This is another modern misconception. Making mistakes under command strengthens. Making mistakes due to indecision weakens. The mind respects those who act and adjust. It despises those who hesitate indefinitely. The reinforcement of identity is clear. Men don't seek absolute certainty. They seek direction. Certainty is a luxury that doesn't exist in real life. Direction is a choice. And every sustained choice reduces anxiety because it creates psychological continuity. The closure is silent. If you need to overthink before each step, it's not because the world is complex. It's because you don't trust yourself as the ultimate authority. And a mind that doesn't trust its own commander enters a permanent state of alert. The word routine has been demonized. Modern man associates routine with mediocrity, monotony, and lack of freedom. This association is emotional, not functional. In practice, the absence of routine is one of the greatest sources of male anxiety. A mind that needs to decide everything every day wears out quickly. Constant decision-making is the enemy of clarity. Modern anxiety stems from an excess of micro-decisions. What to eat, when to exercise, when to work, when to rest, when to reply to messages. Everything becomes open, flexible, negotiable. This seems like freedom, but it's mental disorganization. Each choice requires cognitive energy. Without routine, people expend energy even before facing real challenges. The psychological diagnosis is straightforward. Anxious men live in improvisation mode. Constant improvisation demands constant vigilance. Constant vigilance generates anxiety. The nervous system never rests because it doesn't know what to expect. Predictability is a biological need ignored by modern culture. The modern flaw lies in the obsession with feeling like it. Men wait for motivation to act. They wait to be in the right mood. They wait for emotional alignment. This is an adolescent mentality applied to adult life. Men in command don't ask how they feel before fulfilling the basics. They fulfill them, and the feelings adjust afterward. The principle behind this is simple. Routine removes unnecessary decisions and creates mental silence. When schedules are fixed, patterns are clear, and rules are stable, the mind relaxes. It doesn't need to anticipate. It doesn't need to negotiate. It doesn't need to defend itself from the unknown. Anxiety decreases because the internal environment becomes predictable. Practical application isn't about creating a perfect routine. It's about creating a routine rigid enough to eliminate internal debate. Time to wake up, time to work, time to train, time to end the day. Few variables, few exceptions. The mind benefits from focus and stability. Men who resist routine often confuse discipline with a loss of identity. In reality, the opposite is true. Routine creates a foundation. Identity is strengthened because a man begins to trust himself. He knows he will do what he has decided to do, regardless of his mood. This inner confidence is one of the greatest antidotes to anxiety. The industry doesn't promote this because routine creates predictable men, not predictable to the system. A man with internal structure doesn't react to every external stimulus. He chooses when to respond. This reduces consumption, reduces impulsivity, and reduces external control. The ultimate identity reinforcement. Free men don't live by improvising. They live by structuring. True male freedom lies not in doing whatever one wants, but in not being a slave to one's own mind. The lockdown is filled with heavy silence. If your routine is chaotic, your mind will be chaotic. And as long as there is internal chaos, anxiety will continue to play its role as a warning. Modern man wakes up every day deciding who he will be. That's the mistake. He believes that freedom is being able to choose everything all the time. In reality, this absence of a code is what keeps his mind unstable. A man without personal codes lives in constant adaptation. Constant adaptation generates insecurity. Insecurity generates anxiety. Codes are not just pretty values written in a notebook. Codes are rules of conduct that don't change according to mood, environment, or social pressure. When a man has no codes, every situation becomes a moral dilemma. Every confrontation becomes an internal negotiation. Every decision requires excessive effort. This wears down the mind. The psychological diagnosis here is straightforward. Anxiety arises when a person doesn't know how they will act until the moment arrives. Uncertainty about one's own behavior creates internal vigilance. The mind is on alert because it doesn't trust the individual's established pattern. It needs to monitor everything because there is no moral automatism. The modern mistake is confusing flexibility with emotional intelligence. A person who is too flexible becomes too malleable. They change their discourse according to the environment. They adjust their posture according to external approval. This fragments their identity. A fragmented identity generates instability. Instability generates anxiety. The principle of implicit command is this: codes reduce cognitive load. When a person knows exactly what they accept, what they reject, what they do, and what they don't do, the mind relaxes. It doesn't need to improvise. It executes. This creates internal coherence. Coherence eliminates diffuse anxiety. Anxious men often lack clear guidelines regarding work, relationships, physical discipline, pleasure consumption, and time management. Everything is relative. Everything is negotiable. This creates a life full of exceptions. The mind hates constant exceptions. It needs rules. Practical application demands firmness. A man needs to write down, mentally or on paper, his non-negotiable codes, minimum hours, standards of conduct, clear boundaries. This isn't about social rigidity, it's about inner stability. The less you negotiate with yourself, the less noise your mind creates. A man with a code doesn't constantly wonder if he should practice. He practices. He doesn't wonder if he should tell the truth. He tells it. He doesn't wonder if he should procrastinate. He executes. This internal predictability generates confidence. Internal confidence reduces anxiety. Identity reinforcement. Strong men don't spend their time discovering themselves. They spend their time maintaining themselves. Identity isn't something you seek. It's something you sustain under pressure. And sustaining it requires fixed rules. The closure is abrupt. As long as you need to decide who you are in each situation, your mind will remain in a state of alert. Codes end internal debate. Ended debate eliminates anxiety. There is a paradox that modern man does not understand. The more he avoids burdens, the heavier everything seems. He tries to make life lighter, more comfortable, safer. He removes challenges. He avoids responsibilities. He reduces confrontation. The result is not peace. It is constant anxiety. The male mind was made to carry weight. The weight of decisions, the weight of responsibility, the weight of consequences. When this weight is artificially removed, the mind creates directionless tension. Energy without a target becomes anxiety. The man senses that something is wrong, but doesn't know where to release it. The psychological diagnosis here is clear. Anxious men are underburdened with real responsibility. They deal with stimulation, social pressure, and abstract expectations, but not with concrete weight. They don't command teams. They don't lead processes. They don't bear the brunt of direct consequences. This creates a feeling of uselessness disguised as stress. The modern flaw is selling the idea that less responsibility brings more well-being. That works for children, not for men. A man without a burden loses his bearings. He doesn't know why he wakes up. He doesn't know what sustains him. His mind goes into a state of alert because there is no clear operational purpose. The implicit principle of command is this: organized responsibility calms the mind. When a man knows exactly what depends on him, anxiety diminishes. The mind focuses on what matters. The rest becomes irrelevant noise. Real weight replaces imaginary worry. Practical application isn't about seeking out more random tasks. It's about taking on clear and measurable responsibility. Projects with a beginning, middle, and end. People who depend on your execution. Standards that need to be maintained daily. This creates psychological gravity. The mind organizes itself around it. Men who avoid responsibility often say they are overwhelmed. They aren't. They are scattered. Scattering is more tiring than real weight. Real weight provides direction. Direction reduces anxiety. The reinforcement of identity is straightforward. Men don't run from burdens. They choose which burden to carry. This choice transforms pressure into purpose. And purpose silences the mind. The final conclusion of this section is simple and unemotional. If your life is too light, your mind will become too heavy. Anxiety is not a flaw. It's a warning that you're not carrying what you should be carrying. Modern man lives surrounded by stimuli that compete with each other without any hierarchy. News, messages, opinions, alerts, demands, comparisons. Everything arrives with the same psychological weight. The mind wasn't made for this. It needs to know what is a priority and what is irrelevant. When this hierarchy doesn't exist, the mind enters a state of continuous alert. That is anxiety. The problem lies not in the sheer quantity of information, but in the absence of a filter. A person without a mental filter absorbs everything, and someone who absorbs everything controls nothing. Anxiety arises when the mind needs to respond to multiple simultaneous demands without a clear criterion of importance. The psychological diagnosis here is simple. Anxious men don't know what to ignore. They think that being attentive to everything is a sign of responsibility. It isn't. It's a sign of hierarchical weakness. A commander who reacts to every noise loses the war. A man who reacts to every stimulus loses mental control. The modern flaw is confusing access to information with an obligation to respond. People feel the need to opine, respond, follow, and react. This creates a permanent state of readiness. The nervous system is constantly on high alert. There is no rest because there is no clear priority. The implicit principle of command is this: hierarchy of attention eliminates anxiety. When a man consciously decides what deserves focus and what will be ignored, the mind slows down. Ignoring is not negligence. It is authority. It is deliberate choice. Practical application requires cuts. Cut out irrelevant sources of stimulation. Cut out pointless discussions. Cut out consumption of information that doesn't translate into concrete action. A man in command doesn't live updated on everything. He lives aligned with what matters to his current mission. Anxious men often say that everything is important. This phrase is an admission of a lack of discernment. If everything is important, nothing is central, and a mind without a center spins. Constant spinning generates anxiety. Identity reinforcement. Strong men are not reactive. They are selective. They choose where to put their mental energy. This choice creates inner silence. Inner silence is a sign of control, not ignorance. The closure is stark. As long as you allow any stimulus to enter your mind without permission, anxiety will continue doing the work of trying to organize the chaos. It's not the problem. It's a symptom of a lack of hierarchy. Here lies the final rupture between modern man and the man under command. One seeks emotional relief. The other seeks functionality. Anxiety persists when the primary goal is to feel good, because feeling good is volatile, subjective, and unstable. Functioning well is concrete, measurable, and structuring. Modern man asks, "How do I stop feeling this way?" The man in command asks, "What needs to be done now?" This difference seems subtle, but it defines everything. Focusing on feeling keeps the mind revolving around itself. Focusing on function shifts attention outward, to the action, to the result. Anxiety decreases when the mind has a clear task. The psychological diagnosis is straightforward. Anxious men are excessively self-centered, not out of narcissism, but out of disorientation. When there is no clear purpose, the mind turns inward, and the more it observes itself, the more unstable it becomes. The modern flaw is selling emotional comfort as the ultimate goal of male life. This creates fragile men, dependent on favorable internal states to act. Reality doesn't work that way. Pressure exists. Discomfort exists. The man who only acts when he feels good will be controlled by his own mind. The implicit principle of command is this: functionality precedes well-being. When a man functions well under pressure, well-being appears as a consequence, not as a goal. Anxiety decreases because the mind perceives usefulness, direction, and effectiveness. The practical application is brutally simple. When anxiety arises, don't negotiate with it. Just ask, what is the next concrete action? Execute. Small, objective, real. The mind changes state when it enters execution mode. The feeling adjusts afterward. Men who master their minds are not emotionally numb. They simply don't let emotions take control. Emotions inform. Decision governs. This internal hierarchy is what separates stability from chaos. Final reinforcement of identity. Men don't live to feel good. They live to fulfill a function, bear a burden, and maintain direction. The well-being that matters stems from that. The closure is a heavy silence. As long as your goal is to eliminate unpleasant sensations, you will remain a slave to them. The day your goal is to function under any internal state, anxiety loses its authority. There comes a point when a man needs to face the fundamental truth. Eliminating anxiety isn't about adding something new to life. It's about removing old versions of himself. And that hurts more than living with the symptom. Most men prefer to manage anxiety because it doesn't require structural change. Eliminating the cause requires a rupture. breaking with comfortable habits, breaking with narratives that justify weakness, a break with the identity of a man in process. The final psychological diagnosis is this: many men are not anxious because they don't know what to do. They are anxious because they know exactly what needs to be done, and they don't want to accept the emotional and social cost of change. Anxiety becomes a smokescreen. As long as it exists, the decision can be postponed. The modern mistake is treating anxiety as something external to one's character, as if it were an unwanted visitor. It isn't. In most cases, it's a direct consequence of repeated choices: avoiding confrontation, avoiding discipline, avoiding structure, avoiding responsibility. Eliminating the cause means admitting this without excuses. The implicit guiding principle here is relentless. Identity precedes mental stability. A man divided internally will never be calm. An inconsistent man will never have mental silence. Anxiety is the friction between who you say you are and how you actually live. Practical application at this point is not technical. It's an identity decision. Who do you stop being from now on? The man who negotiates with himself, the man who waits to feel the urge, the man who needs to understand everything before acting. These versions need to die so that command can exist. Men who eliminate anxiety don't talk about it. They change their posture, they change their pace, they change their pattern. The mind follows, it always follows. It respects consistent action, not intention. Identity reinforcement. Men don't transform themselves through insight. They transform themselves through sustained rupture. And every true rupture generates temporary discomfort and lasting stability. The conclusion of this topic is straightforward. If you're not willing to let go of who you are today, don't complain about the mindset you have. Anxiety is loyal to your current identity. Change that identity, and it loses its function. This is the end, and it's not reassuring. The weak man asks, why? The man in charge asks, who governs? As long as you try to understand anxiety as a psychological mystery, it will remain in control. The moment you treat it as a sign of structural failure, the game changes. Because structure can be corrected. Emotion is not negotiable. Emotion is organized through consequence. The final diagnosis is simple. Anxiety persists where there is no internal authority, where there are no codes, where there is no routine, where there is no burden, where there is no decision, where there is no hierarchy of attention. Everything presented in this video points to one thing: the remote control. The modern failure was teaching men to observe themselves too much and govern themselves too little. This created a generation of conscious, articulate, informed, and unstable men. Information without command does not generate strength. It generates confusion. The bottom line is this, and it doesn't change. Strong men don't manage anxiety because they don't live in a way that makes anxiety necessary. They don't build lives based on emotional comfort, but on function, discipline, and direction. Final application isn't gradual, it's immediate. Today, now. Where is your most obvious lack of control? In sleep? In your body? At work? In your use of time? Start there. One point, one cut, one sustained decision. The mind responds quickly when it perceives real authority. Final reinforcement of identity without romanticizing. Men don't need peace, they need order. Peace is a consequence. Order is a choice. And the final silence is this: if your mind controls you, this channel is not for you. If you want control, stay.